Welcome to the Next Level podcast. I'm Brian Lemmer presenting the first edition where we interview Joe Mooney, and we're going to take a deep dive into his life growing up, how he incorporated his passion into his daily life, and how he took that to the next level. As mentioned before, we're going into a deep dive interview with Joe Mooney. Joe Mooney is the head coach at the UWS men's soccer program. He's had great success, especially in recent years. 2018-2019 regular season champ in the UMAC, 2017, 2018, 2019 tournament champ, which when you win the UMAC tournament, you get a berth into the national tournament for soccer, similar to the March Madness in men's basketball, if you're familiar. 2017, they were 1-0 right away, but in 2018 and 19, round of 32.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brian. What else can you say? It's been a pretty magical time. I think it's been a few years with some pretty special players. I think a lot of great leadership. I think really what it comes down to is just kind of the consistent progression of the program and just kind of each guy year to year leaving his legacy, and then for the returners to try to take off of that legacy and continue to improve. And at a certain point, you become pretty excellent, I think, and I think that's kind of where we are now, looking to hopefully start to launch off of that and hopefully get to some further steps here in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started coaching in 2008, and you steadily improved the program till 2013. You won the WIAC's inaugural postseason tournament. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
And that is pretty serious. If you don't know, in D3 sports, the WIAC is one of the strongest conferences for most sports, and to win it it's almost not quite, but it's almost like winning a national champion in some regards of how competitive it is. When you took up the job in 2008, you'd come off of 1 year as a volunteer assistant. The position opened up. You started coaching. Where was the program at, and how? Obviously, we just heard you're taking us to a national championship. There's a huge amount of change that would happen, but talk us through when you took the position, where the program was at, and how much you've changed it.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys would say that there was a level of player at the program, up through 2008, where there were, guys that could definitely play. I think that what we lacked was a lot of, just kind of consistency game to game, throughout training, probably not the same depth that we have now. And I think just kind of the same, kind of standard of excellence that we've tried to achieve now. Really, when I took over the program in 2008, I think my thought process was I really wanted us to just be legitimate. Simple example: if you're at the mall and you were wearing, one of our alums was wearing a UWS soccer sweatshirt, and somebody else came up and said, you played at UWS, you played soccer there, what would you want them to think about you, as a player
absolutely.
for that team? Where I feel like up to that point it was kind of like, you played D3 soccer, you probably wandered onto the program, thought, intramurals or club would be cool. Maybe this is a step up from that, and I wanted to take it from that level to, when somebody saw you and saw you wearing, the UWS crest or whatever, to say, wow, you must have been a fairly legit player if you were able to play with that squad, right? And so that was always the goal. It was never national championship. It was never conference championship. It was, it was really not even result-based in terms of something real tangible. It was just that legitimacy, wanting to feel like, we were a legitimate college Division III program.
Yeah, absolutely. When you played at UW Superior in, I believe, 2001 to 2005, did you feel like I'm proud to be a UWS Yellow Jacket, or was there a level of I'm the best? Tell me about you as a player when you played here.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't want to say that there was a lack of pride by any means. I think that, myself and some of the players, some of my teammates, we had a lot of pride in what we did as individuals and even in the collective to an extent. But I don't think that it was necessarily associated with the school or with the program yet. It was more so just, we're going to train hard, we're going to try to do our thing. But, at the end of the day, going into games against, I can remember going to games against, Oshkosh or Whitewater, or, some of the MIAC schools, and just thinking we don't really have a shot today. It's just really, can we keep the score low, and I think, really trying to go from that standpoint to we can play with anybody in the country, that's kind of been the goal.
Absolutely. And during your college years, you played in Scotland for a brief stint. Can you talk about that? I mean, how did you get hooked up with going overseas to play in Europe? What was it like being in a different culture and coming back to the States and being like, oh, this is what's different from a cultural sense, and also within soccer culture, what was different?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason I went over there, I was part of the Wisconsin and Scotland program. So the UW system has a really cool study abroad program where they have a connection with a duke over there who rents out his palace just outside of Edinburgh.
That is awesome.
Yeah, for free. I mean, so like it literally didn't cost any more money to do this than it would have to go to UWS for a semester, right? So I mean, obviously, I spent more money while I was there.
Yeah.
Plane trips to Dublin and Paris and whatever else, right? Tours down to London and whatever. But, for tuition and housing, it was the same price. So, went over there and when I got there, everybody was assigned a host family. Just somebody that, every couple of weeks you go over to their house for dinner and my family was great. And my host dad was actually on the board at a juniors club there, Newton Grange Star Club. And got me a tryout. It was a funny try. Like when I thought of tryout, like I thought like going to a combine or something like that, right? Where it was going to be something official. I took the bus over there. Had no idea where I was going. Had my kit with me. Brought a ball with me, which immediately I was the goon of the whole squad. I brought my own ball. The boys had a laugh about that at my expense, right? So. And it was literally just a training session. It was a Wednesday night training session. And, I got there and knew nobody, didn't have a chance to meet any of the managers or anybody. I literally met one of the players on the bus.
Yeah.
He showed me how to get to the grounds. And it's kind of a funny story, how I got in with this whole group. So I'm just chilling on the field, ended up meeting the goalkeeper. I don't even remember his name. But he and I just started, kind of kicking the ball back and forth. And, 10 minutes to go before training started. And I, he and I kind of got further distance apart, so now we're taking, 40, 50-yard balls, just take them down off your chest and pop them back to each other, right? And I remember, he sent a ball to me. I took it down. I, went to go step into it. I looked down at the ball, look up at the guy, looked down at the ball, put my laces through it, and I look up, and he's gone. And the entire field is cleared. Everybody's running into the touchline, and I had no idea what was going on. And so I hear this big, loud, booming voice from across the field, and it's, Cheesehead, get the F over here, right?
Yeah.
And I run over, pick up my ball, right? Run across the field, and just scared of this big monster of a dude, right?
Yeah.
And he starts just lacing into me, when I say to come, and it's just F-bomb this and much harsher words, very much a part of the Scottish culture, right? And so he's lacing into me, and I'm just do I leave? Do I just take my ball and go home? Literally just bounce from this club? And he looks at me and he goes, I'll bet you didn't think I knew what a cheesehead was, you F. And just and the whole squad starts roaring, right? So this guy was obviously messing with me and so ended up training with him. Afterward he said, it's been way through the season. It's late January. Ended up, he just said, you can train with us, the rest of the spring. Here's kind of how it works. So I trained with him for a few weeks, just thinking that's how it was going to be.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of cool. So a few weeks into it, the manager calls me into his office and says, hey, we've got a few injuries this weekend. So if you want, you can come and play in the Saturday game. Or he said you can dress for the Saturday game. You won't get in, but you can dress for it. And I'm just on a high, right? And I have no idea what the level is versus any, it just, I don't know. I'm completely clueless, right? So I get to the match, warm up, whatever, sit down on the bench. We're down 1-0. Second half starts up. We're down 1-0, and like 58th minute, he says like, go warm up. And like I literally knew nothing about international football at all.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know substitution rules or anything like that. Like I just, I was completely inept to it. So anyway, so I started warming up and I get in the game in like the 63rd or 65th minute, and not like 10 minutes into my time on the field, ball comes into me. I'm 23 yards out.
Yeah.
Back to goal. Ball comes into me. Turn, hit the ball. Like I mishit it. Like mishit the shot. But I watch this ball like slowly trickle in to the far net. And,
Yeah.
like, we score.
Side netting and everything.
Side net,
just,
like, yeah.
beautiful.
Worst goal I've ever scored. Like it was absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
Like couldn't have been a slower shot. Like.
So you scored on your international debut, essentially.
On the debut,
not international, but you're
we'll call it international debut. Let's go with that, right? Yeah. No, I mean, so it was cool. So the manager after the game asked me if I wanted to sign as like kind of I forget if you call it like a guest player or a loan player at that point or whatever. So obviously wasn't paid, kept my eligibility, all that stuff. But then got a chance to train with them for the rest of the spring. Got in a few more games. And that was kind of the deal.
Now, in hindsight, I mean, I'm sure in the moment you were probably contemplating, like, wow, do I take this? What were your thoughts in the moment of where do I go next? Scoring goals in Scotland, was this it's a semi-pro team? Do you know the division you guys were in? Are you familiar? At the time you said you weren't familiar, but in hindsight, are you familiar now with how serious of a club they were?
Yeah, I mean, there were guys in the club that, I mean, there's former, La Liga players and NSPL players and EPL players. Like, it's a good level. And you could ask the boys in the squad now, about the level, and they could probably rattle off some names that have played with that club and played, for Hearts or Celtic or whoever as well. By my standard, it was a level up, I don't think that it would be anything that, if you were there, people would probably say, it's fine, it's good, you know. But I think there's probably a spectrum within the league itself.
Yeah, for sure. Any other great highlight, other than this P-roller style goal to start off your career? Do you have any other great highlights?
I want to be clear, that was the only goal I scored in 4 caps for the squad.
All right.
And it wasn't magnificent by any means, and I don't think I would have gotten a shot if they weren't low on players. It was kind of the stars were aligned, and the dumb Yank did his job on the day. And,
the cheesehead.
Yeah, the cheesehead.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so before college, growing up, youth soccer, sounds like your mom and dad were very influential to building up soccer in your hometown of Spooner, and I would imagine you and your brothers then were kind of developed at the same time as the soccer scene in your area did, which gives you a little bit of advantage when you're at the top of the biggest fish in your pond, regardless of how big it is. But talk me through Spooner soccer, high school, growing up as an adolescent, what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, so you have to understand, like, Spooner, Wisconsin it's a small town in northwest Wisconsin. It's halfway between Duluth and Superior and Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And
time-wise,
it's a small town. There's 2 stoplights in the town. There's 2,600 people, and I love it. Like, that's not to downplay it. Like, I love the city and the people there and everything, right? But there wasn't a soccer program. Literally, I was part of the first group that went through. And my parents, my dad especially, was very involved early on in terms of like starting the program with a few other community members that had a vested interest in it, and so it was all AYSO to start out with. Very, very rec oriented, which was good. I mean, for a kid like me, I was always the smallest kid in my class. So basketball wasn't going to work out well for me. Football wasn't going to work out well for me. I told Holden, like, I tried my hand at wrestling just because I could compete in the 103 weight class as a freshman in high school and didn't have to lose any weight, right? But soccer was a game, where like anybody can play it. I mean, you think about Leo Messi is the best player in the world, and he's 5'8"?
Yeah, he's
130
comparatively
pounds,
to the rest
right?
of the league. He's a small guy. I'm sure if you see him in the street, he's a normal guy, but I mean, he's not a big dude.
Right. So it was a sport for me. I think for a lot of kids in the area that they could be successful even if they weren't in one of the kind of whatever kind of premier sports. In Northwest Wisconsin.
And what was it like developing in a small area where soccer wasn't a big... I grew up in Wausau, Wisconsin, spent some time in Sheboygan Falls, Wisconsin, and played soccer, but didn't really know... I mean, I thought the MLS was a big deal growing up, and then I realized that the MLS was very, very underdeveloped in about like mid-2000s. Started to figure out, oh, England soccer's pretty good, Spain's pretty good, Italy, learning about all these leagues. When in your life did you really start to plug into soccer's my sport?
I would say probably like middle school.
Middle school?
Where it just, I loved it enough where I became, one of the better players in a very small town, right? So, when people were playing it at recess, like I felt like I could excel. Like when it was touch football on the other side of the field, it's like, I can't throw the ball 10 yards. Like I'm just, not athletic in that sense. So, but that was a sport where I felt like, I can kind of stand out here a little bit. And so that was part of, I think, just kind of like the development of the passion for it was something I could be good at. And then I don't know when that switch was, somewhere probably between like 6th and 8th grade where it was like, no, I really love this. Like I love the way the ball feels on my foot. Like I love, being able to ping a ball and take a ball down and, strike a ball well and put texture on it. And like all that stuff just became really fun, where it was like just a challenge day to day to really kind of like learn that next skill, that, that thing that you couldn't do yesterday that now you've mastered today.
Yeah, and did that passion develop from a passion for competition and athletics? Did it develop from just you moved on from something else you loved and now soccer was kind of the replacement, or was it just a new, like how did the passion for soccer develop beyond just, oh, I'm good at this? Like where did it come from? When did it really become like this is my passion and not just this is something I enjoy and I'm good at?
I think there's a lot of factors, and I would suspect that that's probably true for anybody involved in sport. I would think, right? That
even non-sports, the level of passion is so deep.
Yeah,
and I see it in you every day, where it's almost hard to be around because the way you talk about soccer makes me want to just go all in on soccer. But I'm a student and I've got other things. And when did that hit you?
Yeah, I think probably that same timeline. It was kind of like mid to late middle school, going into high school. It really became like my identity, I think probably 8th grade on, and that was the first year where Spooner had a traveling team, so they would go up to Duluth and play in the rec league in Duluth. But like to us, like that was the show, like that was big time, and it's pretty cool to think about some of the adults involved in that whole equation that, this really wasn't a thing, but they had a bunch of kids that was their passion. And so, they got involved with it, so it was a lot of parents. There were a few community members that just had ties to soccer that got involved as well. And it's like, do you ever really stop and think back to like just how grateful you should be to those people for making it fly and making it, again, like, we felt like this was big time stuff, so it was right around that time. And so I think that was a part of that passion that developed. I think, knowing that it was big in my family, both my brothers played, my mom had an enjoyment for it. And then, my dad was my coach, for a lot of years. All the way youth on up through high school. So having that thing that my dad and I could really share and kind of just invest the same kind of love and passion into was pretty cool as well.
Where did your family's soccer background come from? Where did that develop?
It's funny because like I talked to my dad about, like my mom had never played. My dad talked about it. He grew up. He went to high school like at a seminary, and like every once in a while like playing at recess there. And I think like a little bit of just like maybe kind of club-ish is kind of like how he described it, I guess. But he was never proficient in it by any means.
Yeah.
And so, for him to kind of take it on, it was really just, it was a youth activity that didn't really it wasn't formed yet, So like, I think that was part of it is like, I think he saw like the enjoyment that I had in it, even from a young age, 5, 6 years old, right? But then, Spooner already had a basketball team, so it's like, he didn't really have to like go and push anything through. Like that was already developed, right? A football team, a wrestling, like all of that was already there. Youth baseball, everything, right? where it's like, okay, there's a bunch of kids that maybe want to take their sport a different direction. Like if I would have said, I want to go try ultimate frisbee or, whatever it might be, like something else that wasn't there, I think he would have probably, kind of dived head first into it as well.
That's really cool to hear. I know a lot of parents go the other route and they look at their habits and they try to not necessarily push their habits on their kid, but they really hope their kid does what they do and they expose their kid to a lot. And it almost sounds like your dad went full 180 and went, what is Joe Mooney or your brothers, what do they want to do? Let me get involved with that. That's so cool to hear.
I think, and I think it wasn't even just that. Like I think, obviously he always wanted what was best for myself, my brothers, right? But I think one of the things that was really cool about, both my parents is like they're so community driven.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like, let's find something that, my kid can be good at and let's, get this dude to the next World Cup. That wasn't what it was at all.
100%.
Thank God, because I would have let him down big time, right? But it was more so like what could help this community thrive, and not that it wasn't already in some of those other sports, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I don't want to take anything away from some of the folks that had done very well to get established programs in youth baseball and youth basketball and Boy Scouts and whatever else, right, in the community. All that existed already, but can the community expand and can we give another avenue for more kids? Like, I honestly think that was one of his really kind of big driving factors. And again, for both my parents,
Yeah. Now, are your parents still very involved in the Spooner community?
In the community, yeah. In soccer, not as much. I think my mom still runs the scoreboard, for a lot of the games. My dad will go to the games and so they also, not only with the youth program, were very involved and instrumental in making that fly. And again, had some other folks in Spooner that really helped with that. A really cool group of adults that really made that fly. But then they were also instrumental in getting it into the high school. So when I first started, it was not a WIA sanctioned sport at Spooner. And then even my junior and senior year, we were, I forget what it was called, like provisional, members of the WIA.
Yeah.
So we weren't in a conference. We couldn't compete in state. We played other high school teams, but it almost didn't count. And then the year after I left was the first year that it was actually fully sanctioned by WAA.
Okay. So you missed out on a little bit of the experience.
So I got to watch, and they made a run like the year after I was there.
Yeah.
Like they had a couple injuries late, but I think they were poised to make like a state run in
That's
year
really cool.
1. Yeah. So it was cool. It was kind of hard to watch. Like,
I'm
to
sure.
be honest,
I'm sure.
It's like,
there's a little bit of
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that taste, not necessarily regret, but it's like,
Yeah.
I could have done that, and I missed my chance.
Yeah, but I was happy for my boys too.
100%, totally understand that.
If they ever listen to it, like Ryan Laporte and Matt Schaefer and Sam Henry, like some like if anybody's from Spooner, like you'll know those names. Like those are soccer guys. Like that was the kind of the next group to go through, and they crushed it.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Now I was gonna ask this next question specifically about your brothers or other people that were tight to you, but maybe just other people in the Spooner soccer community. How many people have come out of that soccer program, soccer community, and done similar, not necessarily similar things to you, not to use you as the top mark, but how many other people from the Spooner soccer community are still living, breathing soccer the way you are?
I don't know how many are like at this level. Like I don't think anybody's coaching at a collegiate level,
Okay.
from Spooner. I don't think many went on to play even collegiately. 4, maybe 5 that went on to play collegiately. I mean, in a pretty long stretch. But I think in terms of guys who have an appreciation for the game.
Yeah.
And girls. I mean, like,
Absolutely.
and the girls program too was flourishing for a long time. So I think a lot have that, and that's really, to me, what this whole deal is about, right? It's not just like, this is where I go on a little bit of a rant, right? Like,
Yeah, go for it. Rant away.
I think that there are some things that the USSF is doing that are great. I don't buy into this whole, like, let's get our team to be World Cup champions by 2026 or whatever. Like, that shouldn't be the only goal or the driving goal of the organization. To me, it's about creating fans of the game. And if we can really make the fandom like just blow up in the States, the game will come along with it. That's more what I see. So I think in Spooner as a microcosm for that, it didn't develop a lot of like outstanding soccer athletes, but there's a lot of young adults now that have a true appreciation for the game. I would heavily suspect that a lot of them have kids who are playing, and maybe those kids are the ones that go on to be the next star or whatever,
absolutely.
right? So it can't all be like just tunnel visioned on like how do we get these kids just to go on and be superstars. Let's have more of a long-term view.
Grow the soccer community from the grass up, so to speak. And once the bottom wheels are spinning and people aren't just playing it at youth because their mom and dad put them in it, but people are now loving the game throughout their teens and into their early 20s, you're going to start to see a lot of these athletes that just go pick football because it's the sport to do, say, hey, maybe I want to try out football or soccer. In my mind, that's still football. Try out soccer because that's the sport they like watching and talking about. So I do want to come back to when you talk about great fans of the game, but let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the Spooner women's soccer. Now, did you meet your wife through soccer, or was that just happened to be?
Yeah, in a way, all right. And through Scotland, it's this whole thing, all right. So I won't go too far into depth with this. But yeah, so Spooner in Shell Lake, Wisconsin, very small town, so they don't have any stoplights in the entire town, right?
Okay.
So they're
in Wisconsin, we do tend to measure the size of a city by stoplights, and not just stoplights, but how important that intersection is to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a time where Spooner was trying to get a third stoplight, and it was like that was the buzz for a while. Like have we really made it? So anyway, so she's from Shell Lake, Wisconsin. And so there's a co-op between the two schools for the soccer program. So she had played for my parents, who coached on the boys and girls side, and so got to know her a little bit through that. And then we didn't start dating until college. So the story is, so she and I were both back at a Spooner High School girls game in Rice Lake. And she had just gotten back from visiting her sister, who was doing the Wisconsin and Scotland program.
Okay.
So she and her mom had gone over to Dalkeith and done stayed with her sister for like a week and a half and done the whole Scotland experience, right? So the entire game, I end up speaking to her mom the entire game. Didn't have the fortitude to speak to her. It wasn't as suave as I want to think I am. Didn't have the chops at all to talk to. She was everybody knew Rachel Baldacci, cutest girl in the entire county. It's small town like that. Yeah, I mean so didn't have those kind of chops whatsoever. So talked to her mom the whole time about Scotland and everything. Rach was going to school at St. Scholastica, the bitter rival of UWS, right? So, which is all good. So at the end of the conversation, at the end of the game, so final whistle blows, and I haven't talked to Rachel at all yet, right? I just kind of turned on, I'm like, hey, we should, get together and we can look at photos at some point of Scotland, wouldn't that be fun? Haha, maybe, right? So got her number. Totally fell short on the 3-day rule. Called her the next day.
Love it though.
Yeah. Said, do you want to get together and we can look at photos, and just kind of compare stories and whatever when we talk about Scotland. So we made plans later that week to. The next day we actually worked in her schedule because she was working. So the next day we were going to meet. So I had to go out that night and buy a photo album. Because all my pictures, I literally hadn't looked at them in 4 years since I got back from Scotland. They're sitting in a shoebox under my bed. So I have this this whole plan to let's get together and look at photos. I should make it look like that was actually the plan, right? So I had to go out, buy a photo album, put the pictures in there, right? So we meet at Old Chicago. She didn't even know it was a date. Totally fell short on. Holden and Brian are just laughing at me right now. I hope you guys have better moves than I do, or than I did. So she had to work that afternoon. I forget what happened. Her car, battery died. Something happened. I had to bring her to work. Got her to work late. It was this whole thing. But yeah, we went on a second date and many more after that. So
awesome.
So yeah, so she played soccer growing up, and she was actually very good. I think she probably could have played at the collegiate level. And my parents still say, hands down, one of their favorite players ever to coach. She was top, like, she for sure beat out myself and my brothers. Like, they didn't care to coach us at all, but like, she is one of their all-time favorites to coach. Yeah.
So now, a little hard to make the comparison, but would you say she's a better soccer player than you, relatively? Maybe wouldn't beat you in a 1v1 because there's some differences there, but
I mean, the diplomatic answer, like the one that's
I'm sure she'll listen at home. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think she would say this too. Like, no, she was not the better soccer player, and then I would say all-around athlete, hands down.
Okay.
Yeah. Phenomenal figure skater. We played in like a beer league softball league, like 10 years ago up in Duluth, and she had literally never played softball before and was not great at like swinging a bat and all that kind of stuff, but she was so fast that she was like, her on-base percentage was like close to 1,000 because she would just kind of like dink the ball and then just blow everybody out of the water. Like, so yeah, all-around athlete, hands down, yeah.
All right.
So I really hope that our kids get like her athletic genes, her good looks, like her smart. Like, I don't know what I want them to take from me. Like, but it's not much. Yeah.
Okay. So you have 2 daughters right now. If you want to introduce them, you're more than welcome to. What are they doing right? What are you doing as a dad right now, as a husband? What's going on at home? How does soccer and your life, how does this all tie together?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like that was a big thing. So yeah, Alexa and Kayla, love them to bits. Alexa just turned 7 a few weeks back. Kayla's 4, and I don't think they've developed a soccer bug yet.
Yeah.
Like in terms of just the sport. And if they never do, that's absolutely fine. I hope that they develop an appreciation for a sport or some sports. Alexa will sit down, she'll watch a Packers game with me. And she wants to know more about the game and, what does fourth down mean and what is not quite to the point of like, what's a screen pass or something like that yet. But like, and Kayla just wants to do whatever her sister does, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, but I say it was a big thing when Alexa was born, it really became this thing of like, okay, coaching takes a lot of commitment and passion, and do I have enough of like a passion bank to be able to give enough to the team still on the program and also give enough to my family, right? Because I think being a parent, it should take a lot of passion. And it's something that's, it's the most incredible thing you'll ever do, right? But that was the question of like, do I go and just get a 9-to-5 job so that I can save all that passion and be home and just be all in on this? And I think one of the big things that kept me in coaching was honestly seeing my players around the kids and like watching them come to training and just being around the boys and like jumping on Dalton's back and high-fiving Waddy.
It is a joy to watch them, even at the basketball games, running around interacting with everybody.
Yeah.
It's so fun to see your girls run around.
It's really cool. Like, it really gives me like a lot of just appreciation in humanity and in young people in general. Like, I remember myself as a 20-year-old guy, and it's like, I don't know that I would have cared about, younger kid, like, not that I didn't care. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just, like, it was more so, it was very me driven, at that age. And to watch our guys really just kind of like drop what they're doing and make, my kids or other kids who come to games or whatever just feel special and feel appreciated and loved is like, you really see those guys at their best. It's really cool. But I also look at it and say, like, these girls are going to have some pretty amazing role models in my guys and then the athletics department overall. I want them to be around that, you know? And so that was a big kind of thought in terms of like how to make this work. Like, it's not to try to separate the two. I don't think I could do that where it's like, it's going to be soccer's, 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day or whatever, and families 4 hour days. Like, it's got to be a healthy blend of the two, and there's got to be a real kind of like dynamic interchange between the two. That's the way I found to work it.
Absolutely. And I think I agree in a sense that the things you do that are core to your personality, they do in a way have to mesh. If there's just a switch off when I'm at home, and don't read emails. It's a little different than, like, you can't control when you think about stuff. And if they don't blend, if they fight each other, so to speak, it's hard. It's hard to keep your mental energy and your focus and passion all dialed in.
Yeah, I mean, balance has become one of my core values, and that's kind of the thing that I think I strive for the most, is that balance between, really it comes down to family and the soccer program. You know, like, those are the two things that I'm most passionate about. And it is hard to balance at times, and I think, my wife could tell you about, at times where I probably fail at that balance.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the advantages I have is I have somebody that's extremely understanding, extremely supportive, understands that this is something I'm very passionate about, and kind of shares in that. And even when she can't share it, like, really supports it still.
Yeah.
I think it takes a pretty incredible person to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a level of, whether we're talking about the amount of, not effort, but the amount of time you're able to put into your marriage versus soccer, or you look at the amount of time, the balance between you and Rachel dealing with things in your marriage. Balance doesn't necessarily mean like 50-50. If you think of a teeter-totter, the balance point's always in the middle, but if you've got a 200-pound man on one side and a 40-pound 6-year-old or somebody on the other side, that balance point isn't in the middle anymore, and you have to adjust. And the beauty of being a human is, like, we can decide how much effort we want to put into what task, what people, and that's great.
I got a hammer on that for just a second. Two things. So first, if Pufal, our baseball coach, Frank Pufal, if he listens to this one, he and I talk at length about this.
Okay.
And balance is one that we talk about a lot. And there are some people that will say that, to really be passionate about something or to try to master something, you can't have balance. Like, you got to be all in on it, right? Like, or that the two have to mesh. Like, there's a lot of different philosophies out there. But he and I talk about just what you talked about, like the seesaw kind of analogy. And so now it's not about just 50-50. It's about, we talk about changing the fulcrum, and that's about the extent of my physics knowledge, is kind of where that slides left to right. But, I think that's something that, is pretty key to keep in mind. And, like, in a sport, for instance, that fulcrum might change just based on the season, but then you look at your family life, that might change based on, somebody's birthday is coming up, or, one of my kids or my wife needs me right now, like, I need to be able to adjust that. And that can be tricky at times, because it's really not black and white. The other thing I got to just kind of riff on a little bit is you mentioned, kind of like the relationship with my wife, obviously, and where that, balance is. But I will say it changed 100%. And anybody who's coaching that has kids knows this. The day my first daughter was born, it changed.
Oh, yeah.
In a big way. And I think the biggest difference is, like, I look at the number of hours that I was putting it into, like, being on the road, recruiting, trying to build the program. I could do that, and, like, my marriage was fine. It was great. I think, our marriage was great. And the difference was, if I was gone 2 days for recruiting, I would come home. My wife's the same person. Yeah. Rachel hasn't changed a bit, right? But when I would leave, like with a 6-month-old or, an 18-month-old, when you leave for 2 days and you come back, your kid is a different person.
Yeah.
They're, like, literally, like, their hair length has changed. Like, their hair color has changed. Like, they're doing different things. They're saying new words. They're, they didn't like peas last week. Now they do. I mean, like, just like that.
I've never thought about that side.
How would you, Brian? Like,
like, it's just so eye-opening. Like, obviously, as a 21-year-old, like, I'm not going to think about what it's like to have my kid, but it's just, I feel like I'm a pretty observant person. I've seen, whether it's aunts and uncles or my own parents interacting with me or just random people, I've seen parents, there's stress around the kid, and it's never occurred to me that the stress isn't coming from the relationship of mom and dad. The stress is coming from the kid, which, saying it out loud, it's like, duh. But really thinking about it and changing my perspective, that one, I'm going to have to think on that one for a while. I love that. So you mentioned balance being one of your core values. What are your core values, and whether it's, these are my main 3 and I've got a couple other ones I'm working on, what are your core values like?
Yeah, so I set this a couple years ago, and I think core values can change, based on the different chapters of your life. But this has really kind of stayed true for me, and so the first one is family, obvious core value, and that one rings through with our program. Obviously, I look at it and say like that is the most important thing to me is family. It's the people you care about most. It's the the family that I was born into, the family that I've chosen and helped create. And then obviously the family here at UWS. So that's the first. Balance is the second one. We've talked about that. The third one is outlier. And, that one has been really special to me that, it's not necessarily even something I strive to be. It's something that I think I am, and how I operate is I enjoy looking at things differently. I enjoy if there's a target and 100 people are racing to get to that target and they all take the same path, there's going to be, nobody has a clear edge.
Yeah.
And so if I take a different path to that target, it might blow up in my face, or I might find the better way to get there and maybe the quicker way to get there, or the easy, not even easier, but just like the more efficient way to get there. So like there are schools in Division III, like there's such a big spectrum, right? Like the smallest Division III schools are, 400 or 500 students. The largest are over 20,000 students, right? So there are advantages anywhere you go. There's niches and whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, having the resources of a bigger university, one that might be in a bigger metro, around more, high-level players, or more, like hotbeds for, a specific sport, those all might be advantages. If I try to go up in a recruiting battle against one of those schools, I'm going to lose 9 times out of 10, maybe more.
Yeah.
Right? So I've looked at it like as I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to try to recruit that kid differently, or I'm going to try to recruit a completely different kid, And I think that's part of where we've had some success. And there's other, kind of aspects of my life where I feel like I try to be that outlier. But I just feel like, man, if there's a way to do things and everybody's doing them, it's like, that's already solidified. I'm not going to join the race late and be as good as anybody else in that same race. I got to reinvent the race.
I love that. Now, a lot of the examples you used for outlier were around, let's say around soccer. And I remember through the season, I had the luxury of being a student manager / assistant, whatever you want to call it, and being around the boys,
We call it many different things, Brian.
being around
it was day to day, based on my mood, based on who you were that day. Like,
yeah. So being around the boys and being around the coaching staff, and one of the things we brought up game after game is like, we're just built different, which is ironic because I don't think most people are built different. I don't think we were built different. I think we just acted different. And in a way, like, we were the outliers of, like, we're not going to show up and do the same training regimen every day. We're not going to do the same thing we did in high school. You look at other teams that are in our conference, and we do things very differently. And that is part of what our success is. Is there a way you incorporate that into your home life or non-soccer things?
I think I probably do. I would say that's where maybe it's not even intentional. It's more just kind of who I am. So I would say it again, like my wife would probably be able to tell you, like my best friends would probably be able to tell you, my parents or my brothers would probably be able to tell you, maybe even before I could, just maybe other areas that I would consider.
It's always hard to look at yourself because your lens is so focused on what's around you, not yourself.
Yeah, and especially when it becomes habitual, right? Where it's just like, you look at things differently, you try to do things differently, and so yeah, I think that the last core value is one that probably is much more present in home life, social life, as well as work life or soccer life, and that's positive influencer. So just trying to be whoever I meet with, like just trying to be a positive influence in that person's day or in their life, making a genuinely like a positive impact on that person. And that, I hope that I do that, as a coach. I hope I do that as a employee at the university. And I think I do, and I hope I do, in social settings, family setting, obviously, all that as well.
So we've had many conversations, and in very recent conversations, we talked a lot about relationships. And so you mentioned family, the outlier method. How do relationships tie into those in terms of just relationships regarding people specifically? But maybe not. Maybe you didn't intend it that way. But let's talk about relationships for a second and what your recent thoughts have been on that side of it.
I think relationships are everything. I think that without relationships, like, you don't really exist.
Yeah.
It's so just as a human, like, relationships are essential, right? I think to be high level at most things, especially within a team, relationships are everything.
Yeah.
Right. So specific to soccer, specific to our program, specific to coaching philosophy, is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really become kind of like the base of my coaching philosophy. Before we get into anything tactical, technical, physical development, even mental development, any of that physical development, I think that we have to build a relationship with each player, as a coach. Like, that's our number one job. I need to get to know that person. Let them get to know me. I need to know kind of what makes them tick. What are they motivated by? What are they afraid of? What are their goals? What is their purpose? Develop a trust between each other. I think once we do that, then before we get into all those other elements of coaching, which they're there, and they're all important. But I think before we do that, then the next level of our job as coaches is to really look at, like, what I would just call kind of like character development. So really, each individual taking a hard inward look at who they are, who they want to become.
Yeah.
Part of that is as an athlete, but a large part of that is, as a person. And so I think if we can really start to work on helping each individual become the best version of themselves, and that's become a little bit cliche, I think, recently, but I think it really holds true. Look at all the different versions of you, become the best one on a day-to-day basis. If we establish a relationship, we help them develop their character and give them or help them find their purpose. All that other stuff is easy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, then actually coaching the tactics and the technical elements and all that. If I know who you are, who you want to be, what motivates you, what drives you, what you're afraid of, or what you kind of makes you shrink. If we trust each other, that I trust that you're trying to be your best, and you trust that what I'm doing is trying to help you get to be your best.
Yeah.
Man, that just gives us a huge platform to do all that other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening to our first episode of the Next Level Podcast. We have much more content to come down the road. Tune in next time for more.